He built his cabin log by log. The watching alien mother was a lonely widow longing for family. The rain never really stopped on Kareth Vale. It fell in thin, vertical lines that seemed too orderly to belong to nature, steady, cold, and without pause. The market town of Silva Harbor lived under it like a habit it couldn't break. Glass roofing stretched over the vendor rows, fog clinging to the beams, droplets tapping on steel like a metronome keeping the place awake. Rowan Dunn stepped through the gate with his hood pulled low. His boots hit the stone walkway with the same rhythm the rain carried. He scanned automatically. Entry points, crowd flow, places someone could disappear. Old reflexes from the recon division refused to die. He wasn't here on military orders anymore, but the instincts followed him like an echo. Now he worked for the Eco Council as a forest surveyor, mapping root systems, tracking water veins, keeping the moon's oxygen ratio balanced. He told himself it was piecework. Most days he believed it. He came to Silva Harbor once a week for supplies, sap filters, mapping coils, nutrient pouches, and coffee. He always kept the routine the same. Walk in, buy what he needed, leave. No delays, no small talk. Today, the pattern broke. He saw her at the far stall, near the coffee dispensers. A blue-skinned woman in a thin microfiber shawl and a torn tide-wrap skirt. Her hair was dark copper, slicked down by rain, and she was holding out a woven reed belt to the vendor, trying to trade. The man behind the counter looked disgusted. "We don't take Doc's sleeper crafts here," he said flatly, pulling his hands away like the belt carried disease. The woman, Saria, he would learn, didn't flinch, but her eyes shifted, sharp with controlled anger. The little girl beside her tugged at her skirt. She was 6, maybe same blue tone but lighter, short copper curls matted with rain. She held a tin cup and stared at the ground. Rowan stopped walking. He didn't plan to. He told himself to keep moving, but his body refused the order. Something about the way the woman stood, still, proud, even while being dismissed, cut through the noise of the market. He knew that posture, the same one his squad mates used when they were too tired to argue with injustice. The vendors started shooing them off. "Come on, take your belt and go." Rowan's voice cut in, calm but loud enough. 2 coffees, 1 Larn fruit nectar, a bag of Zyron porridge mix, 1 flatbread, Orvin water. The vendor froze for a second, then switched to business mode, typing prices into the terminal. Steam hissed as he filled the cups. Rowan paid and turned toward the woman. The girl's eyes flicked up at him, bright, cautious, too adult for her size. He knelt. "You hungry?" She nodded once. Her voice was barely there. "Is the purple one sweet?" Rowan opened the nectar and passed it to her. "You tell me." She sipped. Her face softened. "Yeah." Her mother hadn't moved. She stood upright, rain dripping from her shawl, watching him like she was waiting for the trick. Rowan straightened and held the second cup toward her. "I can pay," she said. Her voice was steady, almost formal. "Not with charity." "Then pay by drinking it," he said. "You'll owe me nothing." After a long second, she took it. Her fingers brushed his glove. Her skin was cool, almost metallic to the touch. Her expression didn't break, but he saw the faint twitch in her jaw, pride caught between gratitude and resentment. She took a sip. The tension left her shoulders slightly. He introduced himself. "Rowan Dunn, Forest Surveyor, Ridge Sector, Saria Aneth," she replied, looking him directly in the eyes. "My daughter, where are you staying?" "Under the pier," she said, "until we find work." He nodded. "You won't last another night down there. The tide's rising higher than the barrier. We've survived worse." "I don't doubt that," Rowan said. "But if you want dry ground, I've got a shed and a log pile that needs a roof. You can help me build it. In return, you get food and sleep under cover." She didn't answer. Her gaze ran over him, his clean jacket, his boots, the measured calm in his face. He could tell she was deciding whether he was dangerous or just naive. "You're too kind for someone alone," she said. "Not kind," Rowan replied. "Just tired of seeing the same damn scene on repeat." The vendor cleared his throat, eager to end their presence. "You done here?" Rowan didn't respond. He took the porridge bag and flatbread, handed them to Saria, and motioned toward the door. She hesitated, then touched IRI's shoulder. The girl followed quietly, still sipping the last of the nectar. Outside, the air was cooler. Rain had slowed to a drizzle. The market lights reflected in puddles like broken glass. Rowan kept his pace even, not leading, not following. As they left town, Surya spoke again. "You said you're a surveyor. What does that mean?" "I count trees," he said, "and make sure people don't cut more than the forest can grow back." "Important work," she said, "but you don't talk like a councilman." "I'm not," Rowan replied. "Used to be recon, military mapping corps. Left after the siege. Couldn't watch another forest burn for someone's statistic." He didn't like saying it out loud, but sometimes honesty cleared the air faster than silence. "And you?" he asked. Surya's lips pressed tight. "Used to be part of a water commune. After the vote, they called us inefficient. We left." Rowan didn't ask what inefficient meant. Bureaucracy always found new ways to say exile. They climbed the ridge path. Ferns brushed against their knees, releasing a wet, clean scent. The forest hummed softly with night insects. IRI picked up a round trail marker, a carved cedar disc, and turned it over in her hands. Rowan took it gently and hung it back on its hook. She watched his hand, eyes narrowing like she was learning the motion. At the top of the ridge, the forest opened to a small clearing overlooking a mirror lake. His tool shed stood there, built from old thalwood beams. Next to it, a flat foundation of crushed stone waited for walls. Piles of logs sat under a tarp. "This is where I work," Rowan said, "and where you can stay." Surya looked around. The place was empty but ordered. Knives hung by size, boots by the door, everything squared off. She saw the discipline under the quiet. "You live here alone?" 3 years. "By choice. By process," he said. "After the war, most things are by process." She didn't press. The silence stretched until IRI shivered. Rowan took off his slate jacket and handed it to Surya. "You'll freeze in that shawl." She hesitated again, then took it. It swallowed her frame, sleeves hanging long, hem reaching her knees. The sight hit him harder than expected. Something about the contrast between her alien blue skin and his worn human fabric. It made her seem less foreign. Rowan pointed at the log stack. "That was going to be a smokehouse. Changed my mind." "What for?" He glanced at IRI, rubbing her arms for warmth. "Different priorities." He stepped to the pile, lifted the first log onto the foundation, and started measuring. The rhythm of work steadied his thoughts. He wasn't used to company, but for some reason, the sound of small feet on wet ground and the faint crackle of the shawl fabric didn't bother him. It filled the air in a way silence never had. Surya watched him work. "You build for everyone who feeds you?" "No," he said, "just the ones who look like they'll stay." That earned him the first small smile from her. It wasn't warmth exactly, more a quiet acknowledgement. They worked until the sky dimmed into steel gray. IRI carried wooden pegs and counted them out loud, losing track halfway and starting again. Her laugh startled Rowan. It had been a long time since laughter echoed here. As the rain faded, Rowan lit the cooking stone. Surya prepared Zyron porridge, stirring slow, the smell mixing with the damp air. When she served it, IRI blew on each spoonful before eating. Rowan ate in silence, watching the firelight flicker across the woman's blue skin. Surya broke the quiet. "Why did you help us, really?" Rowan didn't look up. "Because I remember what it's like to be turned away for no reason." She studied him, then nodded once. "Then we're even?" "Not yet," he said. "We've got a roof to finish." Night settled. Surya and IRI lay down on his spare bedroll. Rowan sat near the door, knife across his knee, eyes half open. The sound of the girl's steady breathing filled the cabin frame. He felt the weight in his chest ease slightly, the familiar strain of solitude shifting into something else. He wasn't rescuing anyone. He wasn't saving the world. He was just keeping one more person dry on a wet planet. And for now, that was enough. Morning came with the soft hiss of rain sliding down the new log walls. The smell of wet would fill the air, mixed with the faint sweetness of Zyron porridge left from the night before. Rowan was already awake, sitting near the open doorway with a mug of coffee warming his hands. He had barely slept, not because of fear, He had slept through worse nights in worse places, but because the quiet breathing behind him wasn't his own for the first time in years. Surya and IRI were still asleep on the bedroll, curled together under the mica fiber shawl. In the dim light, their skin carried that faint bioluminescent glow he hadn't noticed before, soft, steady, like light beneath the surface of calm water. It wasn't bright enough to disturb him, just enough to remind him they weren't from here. He took another sip and tried to focus on his day plan, measuring the east wall, checking the resin stock, maybe teaching IRI how to handle a chisel. But his mind kept drifting. He caught himself watching them again, and he hated that it made him feel responsible. It wasn't pity. It was something more complicated. He'd spent 3 years living by a simple rule: no attachments, no debts, no rescues. The world didn't reward those anymore. But now, sitting in that half-built cabin, listening to the soft sound of child's breath, the rule already felt broken. When Surya woke, she didn't move right away. She just lay there, her eyes open, watching the steam rise from his coffee. "You don't sleep much," she said quietly. "Used to sleeping light," he answered. "Old habit." She sat up, her shawl slipping off one shoulder, exposing the curve of her blue skin to the cool air. She caught his glance, but didn't cover herself. "You win the war?" "Recon, yeah," Rowan said. "Mostly field mapping. I watched forests burn from orbit screens. After that, I decided if I was going to watch things die, I'd rather see them up close." Surya nodded, studying him. "You build because you can't undo what was destroyed." "Something like that," he said. "And you?" She hesitated. "Our commune was small. We tended the water veins near the southern marsh. We believed the council would keep us funded if we produced enough." She gave a small laugh, cold and short. "Turns out they preferred numbers over people. We were called inefficient dependents. That was their final notice." Rowan didn't ask what happened next. He could see the rest in her face. The shame of being dismissed, the exhaustion of carrying a child from one rejected place to another. IRI stirred awake then, blinking up at the wooden beams above her. "Did we move?" she asked, voice small and rough. Surya brushed her hair. "A little. We're safe now." The girl sat up and spotted Rowan's coffee mug. "What's that?" "Ferlin seed brew," he said. "Smells better than it tastes." "Can I try?" "Not unless you want to stay awake for 3 days straight." He smiled slightly, and she giggled. The first clear sound of laughter since they'd arrived. He stood and reached for his jacket, realized Surya was still wearing it, and stopped. She noticed the hesitation and held the collar tight around her. "It's warm," she said like a quiet challenge. "Keep it," he replied. "I've got another." They ate breakfast together, Zyron porridge warmed over the small cookstone. Surya added a bit of shaved ryle bark she'd kept in a cloth pouch, giving the air a spicy sweet scent. IRI held the wooden spoon like it was treasure. When they finished, Rowan started the day's work. "We'll raise the east wall today. I need both of you to help." Surya frowned. "You trust me with your tools?" "I trust anyone who ties a better knot than I do," he said, and she smiled despite herself. Outside, the morning fog was lifting. The rain had eased to a thin mist, catching the light like dust. Rowan showed IRI how to carry pegs without dropping them. She followed his every movement with careful focus, her small face serious, determined. Surya joined him at the log pile, her ankles still slightly stiff. "You hurt your leg," Rowan said, noticing her limp. "Old strain. It will fade." He nodded. "If it gets worse, I have med resin in the shed." "I said it will fade," she repeated firm. Then, after a beat, "But thank you." They worked for hours. Rowan cut grooves and measured angles. Surya steadied the logs as he lifted them into place. Her grip was strong, fingers marked by years of work. When the wall stood firm, they both stepped back, panting from the effort. IRI clapped once, proud. Rowan smiled faintly. Not bad for a morning. Surya looked at the wall, her expression shifting from exhaustion to something softer, maybe pride. "I never thought I'd build another home." "You're not done yet," he said. "Homes take time." By midday, the mist had turned into a thin drizzle again. Rowan started a small fire under the overhang and handed her a cup of warm water. "You'll need a thicker shawl before the next cycle." Nights get cold up here. I can trade, she said. I make good belts. People in town weren't exactly lining up for those. She looked at him sharply. You saw that? He nodded. I saw how you held your ground. Most would have walked away. Saria's jaw tightened. I have a daughter to feed. I don't have the luxury of walking away. I respect that. For a while, the only sound was the fire crackling and IRI humming to herself as she stacked small stones in patterns near the logs. Then Saria spoke again, quieter. Why did you stop at that stall? You didn't know us. I didn't like the way he talked to you. That's not enough reason to take us in. Rowan looked at her directly. Maybe not, but I was raised to fix what I can reach. You were close enough. She blinked, unsure how to respond. The air between them grew heavier, charged but not tense. Just real. Later, while IRI napped inside, Rowan worked on trimming a doorframe. Saria joined him, sanding the edges smooth. You measure everything, she said. Habit. Makes the world make sense. Does it help? You stop thinking. Sometimes. Until something shows up that doesn't fit the pattern. She glanced at him, eyes steady. Like us. He didn't answer, but his silence said enough. When evening came, they ate Draxon mushrooms roasted in a small pan. IRI woke and crawled into Saria's lap, already half asleep again. The cabin smelled of smoke and rain and new wood. Rowan sat across from them, his tools cleaned and stowed. For the first time, the place didn't feel like a shelter. It felt inhabited. Saria's voice broke the quiet. What happens when the council comes? They'll see this cabin, ask questions. I'll handle it, Rowan said. You and IRI stay out of sight when they do. She looked uncertain. You'd risk a fine? I've paid worse, he replied. Something shifted then, something small but real. The distrust in her eyes loosened a little. She didn't thank him. She just nodded, as if they'd made an agreement neither of them had said out loud. When she put IRI to bed, Rowan stepped outside. The rain had stopped completely. The forest glistened under a pale blue sky. He listened to the quiet, every sense tuned the way it used to be in the field, but instead of waiting for danger, he found himself waiting for peace. Inside, Saria moved softly, wrapping the shawl around herself. Rowan turned back toward the cabin door and hesitated, hearing her hum a low, unfamiliar tune. It was a sound he hadn't realized he missed, something human or close enough to it. He looked at the half-built structure, the stacked logs, the faint smoke curling from the roof. It wasn't much, but for the first time since he'd arrived on this moon, it didn't feel temporary. Tomorrow, he decided he'd build the roof beam. For her, for the child, and maybe, if he was honest, for himself. Dawn came quiet and gray, the air holding that thin chill that comes before the sun clears the ridge. Rowan woke early, as always. He checked the logs drying near the wall, tested the seams for leaks, and listened to the faint rhythmic breath from inside the cabin. He had built shelters before, temporary, military, practical, but never one that carried the sound of life inside it. That detail struck him harder than he liked to admit. He started the fire slow, feeding it with shavings and resin chips until the light grew soft and gold across the interior. Saria stirred first. Her hair, still unbraided, fell in damp copper waves over his jacket. She blinked at him, sleepy and cautious, as if unsure whether the calm would last. IRI's still sleeping, she murmured. Let her, Rowan said. We've got time before the heat rises. He handed her a mug of boiled Orvan water. She hesitated, then accepted it, wrapping both hands around it for warmth. For a long moment, they said nothing. There was comfort in the silence now, a kind of peace that didn't need words. Saria finally broke it. You said you'd handle the council if they came. How? They check remote builds once a quarter, Rowan said. I'll file a field registry before that. Makes it look official. You'll put my name in it. They don't care about names. Only numbers. But I'll mark 2 dependents under work support. They won't dig deeper. She studied him. You've done this before? He gave a small shrug. I've learned how to make the rules work for people who don't fit them. There was something in his tone that made her watch him closer, like he wasn't just talking about paperwork. He saw it in her face, that flicker of curiosity, but he didn't elaborate. The truth was simpler. Once, years ago, he'd done the same for someone else, a wounded technician who hadn't made it through the first winter. He didn't talk about it. As the day brightened, IRI woke with the faint sound of rain dripping from the eaves. She stretched and crawled out from the bedroll, hair sticking in all directions. "It smells like sap," she said. "That means it's a good day to work," Rowan told her, crouching to meet her eyes. "You ready to help again?" "I can carry the small pegs," she said proudly. "You can," he agreed. "And today, you'll learn how to tap sap without cutting the tree too deep." Surya raised an eyebrow. "You're teaching her already?" "She watches everything," Rowan said. "Might as well give her something useful to remember." They stepped outside together. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the forest slick and reflective. Steam rose off the ferns, and a low fog clung to the trunks. The clearing smelled alive: wet soil, resin, the faint metallic tang of thalwood sap. Rowan led IRI to one of the tall trees and showed her the simple motion: carve shallow, angle downward, wait for the clear drop to form. She copied his every move, tongue caught between her teeth, determined not to make a mistake. Surya watched from a few steps away, arms crossed, expression unreadable. When IRI managed to coax the first clear drop into a tin cup, she looked back at her mother. "See? I can do it." Surya smiled, small but real. "You can." Rowan wiped the blade clean and stood. "You've got patience," he said to IRI. "That's rarer than strength." She looked up at him with wide eyes. "Are you a soldier still?" He froze for half a beat. "No, not anymore." "Do you miss it?" she asked, simple and direct the way only a child could. He hesitated. "Sometimes I miss knowing what the day would bring, but not what I had to do to get through it." Surya's gaze stayed on him. "You left because of something you saw, didn't you?" He nodded once. "I saw too much. I stopped believing that destruction could fix anything." She stepped closer. "That's rare. Most soldiers I've met said they stopped because they lost faith in themselves." Rowan gave a faint, dry laugh. "Maybe that too." The conversation ended there, but something unspoken lingered between them. Respect, maybe, or quiet recognition. Later that afternoon, Surya joined him at the workbench. Together, they began smoothing the upper beams for the roof frame. Her hands were practiced, confident, but her movements carried a faint tremor that hadn't been there the day before. Rowan noticed. "Your ankle's still bad," he said. "I said it would fade," she replied, voice firm. He shook his head, crouched, and before she could step back, he knelt near her leg, examining it. "You've been walking on it wrong. You'll tear the ligament if you keep that up." Surya tensed. "I said it's fine." "Hold still," he said, calm but commanding. He wrapped a strip of fabric around the joint, tightening it in a figure-8 pattern. His hands were steady, practiced, too practiced for someone who claimed to have left his training behind. When he finished, he looked up at her. "Better." She tested her step, frowned, then nodded once. "It is." He stood. "You don't owe me thanks." "I wasn't planning to give it," she said. But there was no sharpness in her tone, only quiet gratitude hiding under pride. As the evening came, they sat outside near the fire pit. IRI was drawing lines in the dirt with a stick, whispering small songs to herself. The sky was turning pale gold through the trees. Surya leaned back against a log and let the warmth touch her face. "You never asked what we planned to do," she said suddenly. "I assumed you'd tell me when you decided," Rowan answered. "We don't have a plan," she said. "We were trying to reach the North Passage. There was work promised there. When the ferry broke down, we ran out of money. The council wouldn't renew our travel credits without registration papers. So you stayed," he said. She nodded. "And when we slept near the docks, people started to recognize us as unverifieds. Once that happens, you stop being seen at all." Rowan stared at the fire. "You're not invisible here." She gave a faint, tired smile. "For now." Inside the cabin, IRI's small voice interrupted them. "Can we paint the walls?" Rowan looked back at her. "Paint them how?" "Purple, like the berries." He smiled. "Let's finish them first." The rest of the night passed in easy quiet. Surya braided her hair near the stove while IRI hummed and played with the wood scraps. Rowan sat across from them, the light from the fire throwing shifting lines across his face. For the first time, The cabin felt like it belonged to all three of them. When the child fell asleep, Saria rose to cover her. She turned back to Rowan, hesitating. "You said you were recon," she began. "You must have someone looking for you. Someone who knows where you are." He shook his head. "Not anymore. When I left the Corps, I burned every file that had my name on it. The Council doesn't track ghosts." She held his gaze for a moment, studying the truth of it. "Then you built this place to disappear." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I built it hoping someone would find it anyway." That answer surprised even him. Saria didn't reply, but her expression softened. She pulled his jacket tighter around her shoulders and sat beside the fire again, close enough that their knees brushed. Neither moved away. Outside, the forest settled into its nighttime rhythm. Water dripping from leaves, soft insects humming, the faint wind carrying the smell of rain-soaked wood. Inside, two survivors sat shoulder to shoulder, not speaking, not promising anything, but both knowing that something had quietly changed. By the time Rowan banked the fire, Saria had fallen asleep against his arm. He didn't move her. He just watched the flames lower to embers, the sound of IRIs breathing soft, and even from across the room, and thought, against his own rules, that maybe this was the first night in years he didn't mind being found. The morning after Saria fell asleep against his arm was the first time Rowan didn't wake before dawn. The rain had stopped, and for once the forest was quiet. No dripping leaves, no wind scraping against bark. Just the sound of IRI's light footsteps as she tiptoed toward the doorway, her curiosity pulling her outside. He opened his eyes slowly, the weight of Saria's head still resting against his shoulder. She stirred when he moved, blinking once, realizing how close she was to him. For a second, she froze, then straightened, brushing her hair back quickly as if the moment hadn't happened. "Morning," Rowan said softly. Saria nodded. "Morning." Her tone was neutral, but her eyes avoided his. He didn't push it. He learned long ago that some silences were safer than explanations. Outside, IRI crouched near the fire pit, stacking the leftover stones into a crooked tower. She looked up when Rowan stepped out. "Can I help again today?" "You can," he said. "We're fitting the roof beams. They're heavy, so you'll be the one who keeps us steady by handing the pegs." She smiled proudly. "I can do that." Saria came out behind him, still wrapped in his jacket. She tied her hair back into a loose braid and studied the unfinished roof. "You work like someone who's racing the weather," she said. "On this moon," Rowan replied, checking the beam alignment. "Weather wins every time you stop to rest." As they worked, the rhythm between them settled into something natural. Rowan lifted, Saria steadied, IRI fetched and counted. It was the kind of routine that didn't need words. Every motion had purpose, measured, silent cooperation that made the air between them less tense and more alive. Halfway through the morning, Rowan noticed Saria's shawl sliding down her shoulder again. The bioluminescent freckles along her collarbone caught the sunlight, glowing faint gold against her blue skin. He tried not to look, but the movement drew his eye. She was beautiful in a way that wasn't deliberate, just real. Strong hands, tired eyes, skin flecked with light that pulsed like breath. "You're staring," she said without looking up. He smirked. "You'd notice." "I notice everything," she said quietly. The comment carried weight. There was a guardedness behind her confidence, a trace of someone used to reading rooms for danger. Rowan realized then that Saria wasn't just a worker cast out. She'd probably been responsible for people once. Maybe a leader. Maybe someone who'd had to keep others alive before the council called them inefficient. When they stopped for lunch, Rowan set a small pan on the stove. The smell of roasted Draxon mushrooms filled the cabin. He poured IRI a cup of Larn fruit nectar and offered Saria coffee. "You're the only human I've met who still makes real food," Saria said. "Most live off ration packs and say it's easier." "I try that," Rowan said. "It's easier until you realize you stop tasting anything." Saria's eyes flicked toward him. "You mean more than food?" "Yeah." IRI broke the heaviness between them by asking, "Do you have a family, Rowan?" He didn't answer right away. The question landed harder than he expected. "Used to," he said finally. "They're gone." "Gone where?" Somewhere better than the places I've been. He didn't smile when he said it, but his tone was gentle. Saria didn't press, though she clearly wanted to. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, just thick with things neither of them were ready to say. That afternoon, while IRI napped, Saria stayed outside, helping him seal the roof joints with resin. She worked without complaint, though her fingers were sticky and stained by the amber pitch. When she finished the last seam, she looked at him and said, "IRI needs proper clothes. I can weave fabric if I have reeds, but I'll need to go into town." Rowan paused. "Silva Harbor?" She nodded. "You can't hide us forever. We need to trade. I'll be careful." He frowned. "You remember how they treated you there?" "I remember," she said firmly. "But fear doesn't feed a child." He met her gaze. There was no pleading in her eyes, only resolve. He respected that more than he could say. "I'll come with you," he said. She started to argue, but stopped when she saw his expression. "Fine, but I'll handle the trading." The next morning, they made the walk to Silva Harbor together. The market was busier this time. Carts stacked with harvest bundles, vendors shouting over each other. People stared when they saw Saria. Her blue skin drew the same quiet discomfort as before, though now, with Rowan beside her, most didn't dare say anything. At a stall selling dye and thread, Saria placed one of her woven belts on the counter. The vendor inspected it. "Good work," he said cautiously. "You made this yourself?" "I did. Fair trade for this spool and a fabric sheet," he said. Saria accepted without haggling. Rowan noticed her hands trembling slightly when she tied the new cloth around her arm. He knew what that tremor meant. She hated needing anyone's approval, even for fair trade. As they moved to another stall, a council enforcer in a polished gray uniform passed nearby. His badge glinted. "Housing survey rotations starting early this season," he said to a clerk. "We'll be checking ridge clearings next week." Rowan froze for half a second, masking it by pretending to check a crate. Saria caught the same sentence. He saw her eyes tighten. When the enforcer moved on, she turned to him. "They'll find us." "Not if I file a bond first," Rowan said quietly. "If the cabin's under my name, it's legal. You'll be listed as registered assistants. They won't dig. And if they do, then I'll tell them the truth. Which is that you built half of it with me, and that the child who helped me measure the wall has a better sense of level than any man on their payroll." Saria stared at him for a long moment. Her throat moved as if she wanted to say something, but couldn't. Finally, she whispered, "You'd risk a penalty for us?" "I don't measure worth in penalties," Rowan said. "Only in what's worth keeping." When they returned to the ridge that evening, IRI ran ahead, spinning in the open air, shouting, "The roof doesn't leak anymore." Rowan smiled despite his exhaustion. Saria dropped her trading satchel on the table, looking around at the finished beams. "You worked while I was gone?" "Couldn't sit still," he said. She leaned on the doorframe, watching him, her expression softening in a way that wasn't cautious this time. "You could have left this all half-built after the first storm," she said. "But you didn't." Rowan wiped resin off his hands. "I built it because you were cold," he said. "I finished it because it finally felt right." That night, after dinner, IRI fell asleep instantly. The cabin was warm, firelight bouncing off the walls. Saria sat on the floor near the stove, re-braiding her hair. The silence between them was full, alive. "You don't have to keep fixing everything for us," she said quietly. "I'm not fixing," he replied. "I'm just building something that lasts longer than the weather." She turned her head toward him, her face half-lit, half-shadowed. "You make it sound simple." "It is," Rowan said. "Everything difficult starts simple. It's people who complicate it." She looked at him for a long time, long enough for him to feel it. Her fingers paused in her hair. "Then maybe I'm the complication." "Maybe," he said, "but the kind I don't mind having." That earned him her first genuine laugh, small, real, and tired. She shook her head, still smiling. "You're impossible." He smiled back. "So I've been told." Outside, the rain started again, soft against the roof. Inside, the two of them sat quietly listening. For once, the sound wasn't something to guard against. It was steady, familiar, like a rhythm they'd both been missing for too long. As the fire dimmed and the room darkened, Rowan looked toward the doorway, where IRI slept, and thought of the enforcer's words. The inspection was coming. And yet, for the first time in years, he didn't feel like running. He had something here worth standing for. Something fragile, yes, but real. Tomorrow, he would go to the council station and sign the bond. Not because it was safe, but because it would make this place, this family, official. Even if the world didn't believe in them, the paper would have to. The next morning broke colder than usual. Mist rolled in from the valley, heavy enough to bead against the cabin walls like sweat. Rowan woke before the others and stepped outside, pulling his jacket tight as the sharp air bit through his shirt. The forest looked different in the gray light. Muted, half-dreamed, the world holding its breath. He could hear distant water dripping through ferns and the faint creak of the roof beams settling. The cabin stood solid now. For once it felt like something finished. Inside, Saria stirred awake. He heard her whisper IRI's name softly, the kind of tone mothers use when they want the world to stay kind of a little longer. He smiled to himself. Then he remembered what he had to do that day, the council bond. The thought wiped the warmth away. By the time Saria came out, her hair was loosely tied, and his jacket was still draped around her shoulders. She noticed the satchel packed beside the door. "You're going down to Silva Harbor," she said quietly. He nodded. "I'll file the paperwork. If they ask about you or IRI, they'll have names on record and a reason not to interfere." Her eyes narrowed. "What if they see through it?" "Then I'll handle it," Rowan said. "I don't like that answer." "You don't have to," he replied. "You just have to trust me." She studied him for a moment, then nodded once. "Don't take too long." He left before the sun fully broke through the fog. The path was slick, his boots sinking into the soft ground. As he walked, he caught himself thinking of the two of them in the cabin. The smell of wood fire, the sound of IRI's laughter bouncing against the walls, and how quickly he'd gotten used to it. That scared him more than he wanted to admit. At the town gate, the guard recognized him. "Surveyor Dunn," the man said. "You're early for your rotation." "Council registry update," Rowan said. "New dependents." The guard raised a brow, but didn't question it. "Office opens soon. They'll see you." Inside the council hall, the light was all glass and steel, polished floors that reflected everything too perfectly. It made Rowan uneasy. Nothing about it felt lived in. A clerk at the registration counter looked up with a forced smile. "New housing bond." "Revision," Rowan said, sliding his field pad across. "Adding 2 workers under my residency." The clerk scrolled through the forms. "Off-worlders. Does it matter?" Rowan asked, steady. "Not to me," the clerk said, "but it will flag for review. Still, it's within your rights. You have enough resource credit for dependents." "Check the map logs," Rowan said. "I cleared Sector 9 last month. Full quota." The clerk checked, nodded slowly. "Impressive. That earns you a 3-year exemption." He stamped the digital form. "Names?" Rowan hesitated only a second. "Saria NF. IRI NF. Work type, domestic maintenance, and sap extraction." The clerk's eyes flicked up. "Relation?" "None," Rowan said evenly. "They help. They stay." The clerk entered it without comment. When the confirmation tone chimed, Rowan exhaled quietly. The bond was official. For now, they were safe. He left the office without looking back. By the time he reached the ridge, clouds had broken, letting thin sunlight slip through the canopy. Smoke was rising from the chimney. The smell of food hit him before he reached the door, something savory and warm, maybe the last of the Draxon mushrooms. When he stepped inside, Saria was crouched by the stove, stirring a pot. "You did it," she said without turning. "How do you know?" "You walk like someone who just finished fighting something," she said. He smiled faintly. "Bond signed. You and IRI are officially residents now." She froze. "You used our real names?" "Yes." Her eyes flicked toward him. "That's risky." "It's honest," he said. "And if anyone asks, honesty will hold longer than a lie." Saria studied his face. There was a new stillness in her expression, something caught between admiration and fear. "You're not a man who runs from rules," she said. "You're a man who bends them until they work for you." Rowan set his pack down. "I prefer to call it survival." They ate together quietly, IRI, chattering between spoonfuls of porridge. She asked if they could paint the cabin door purple yet. Rowan promised they would after the resin cured. When IRI went outside to play, Saria stayed by the stove, her hand brushing the side of the pot as she spoke. "I don't understand you," she said softly. "You live alone for years, then you bring strangers into your home and risk your freedom for them. Why?" He looked at her. "Because I've had enough years of quiet. It's not worth much if no one hears it with you." Saria's breath caught a little, but she covered it with a small laugh. "You talk like a man who used to command others." "Used to," he said. "Now I build walls instead of battle plans." She smiled faintly. "Better walls, I hope." Later, as evening approached, they worked outside to seal the final edges of the roof. The golden light hit her skin in soft tones, bringing out the faint glow under her freckles. She looked different in daylight, less wary, more grounded. "I've been thinking," she said while brushing resin along a beam. "Once IRI and I earn enough from trade, we should move on. You've done more than enough." Rowan stopped what he was doing. "Move on where?" "Anywhere," she said quietly. "We can't stay your responsibility forever." He didn't answer right away. He stared at the tree lean, his jaw tightening. "You think I built that cabin for pity?" She frowned. "No, but I don't want to be another mark in someone's record. I've lived through that." He turned to face her. "You're not a record, Saria. You're the reason this place feels alive." The words slipped out before he could measure them. She froze, staring at him, caught off guard by the rawness in his tone. For a long moment, neither moved. The wind shifted through the trees, carrying the scent of pine resin and smoke. IRI's laughter cut through the air, breaking the spell. She was chasing a small, winged insect near the clearing. Saria looked away first, voice low. "You shouldn't say things like that, Rowan." "Why not?" "Because I might start believing them." That night, they sat inside by the fire again. IRI had fallen asleep early, curled under a blanket near the stove. Saria sat across from Rowan, the firelight soft against her skin. She untied her braid, shaking her hair loose. The quiet stretched long between them. "You miss being around people," she said after a while. "I miss being around someone who doesn't ask for reports," he replied. She smiled faintly. "I can live with that." The next few minutes passed in silence. She looked at him once, directly this time. "You built something strong here," she said. "I never thought we'd find a place that felt safe again." Rowan's eyes softened. "Then stay." "I can't promise forever," she said, "but I can promise to help you keep it standing." "That's enough," he said. Outside, wind moved through the trees like low breath. The fire crackled softly, and the shadows on the wall danced like ghosts of their past lives. Soldier, exile, survivor, now fading into something quieter. Something they hadn't known they could still have. When the light dimmed and the fire dropped to embers, Saria rose to check on IRI. Rowan watched her, the curve of her shoulder lit faintly by the glow. She looked back once, their eyes meeting for a heartbeat too long before she turned away. That night, sleep came easier to both of them. For the first time, the cabin didn't just feel built. It felt like home. Morning light spilled through the east window, soft and clean, painting the cabin walls in gold. The air inside was warm from the fire that had burned through most of the night. Rowan stirred before the others, listening for the steady rhythm of the forest outside. The soft tap of dripping water, the distant hum of insects, the faint rush of the nearby stream. Everything felt right. He stood quietly, poured what was left of yesterday's coffee grounds into a pot, and reheated it over the coals. He'd grown used to the small sounds inside the cabin. The faint sigh Saria made when she shifted in her sleep, IRI's quiet snore when she dreamed, the slow creak of the beams when the temperature changed. Once those sounds would have meant distraction. Now they meant life. When Saria finally opened her eyes, she found him watching the sunrise from the doorway. His expression was distant, thoughtful, as though his mind had wandered somewhere far. "You're awake early again," she said, voice low from sleep. "Didn't sleep much?" Rowan replied. "Too many plans in my head." She pushed the shawl from her shoulder, sitting up slowly. "Plans? For the outer wall," he said. "We'll add a storage section, maybe a small space for your weaving. If you're still set on trading again." Saria's lips curved into a faint smile. You think we'll be here long enough to need storage? I plan for things to last, he said simply. Her smile faded slightly. You always sound like you're preparing for a war that isn't coming. Rowan didn't turn. You prepare for peace the same way. You build it before anyone believes it's possible. She fell quiet, studying him. He wasn't romantic when he said things like that. It wasn't poetry, just truth. He'd lived through loss. She could see it in the set of his shoulders. The kind of man who had once carried orders that ruined places, now building one small corner of the world back up, beam by beam. IRI woke soon after, blinking up at them both. Are we going to the market again today? She asked eagerly. Saria shook her head. No, not today. Rowan looked back at the girl. You have another job, painting that door purple like you promised. Her face lit up. Really, he said. They spent the morning preparing the pigment Saria had traded for earlier. The crushed Zyron berries bled into water like ink, turning into a deep, bright violet. IRI dipped her fingers in the bowl, squealing at the cold, then ran to the door and pressed her hand flat against it, leaving a perfect print. Now it's ours, she said proudly. Saria laughed, an honest, full laugh that carried warmth through the room. Rowan found himself smiling at the sound, surprised by how easily it reached him. Later, while IRI played in the yard, Saria joined Rowan by the log stack for the next project. She handed him a cloth, wordlessly offering to help. They worked side by side for an hour, their movements quiet and in sync. At one point, she paused and looked at him. What were you like before the war? Rowan kept his eyes on the log he was cutting. You mean before I learned to stop trusting orders? Yes. He exhaled slowly, the sound sharp in the cool air. I was good at following them. Too good. I didn't question anything until it was too late. Until people I was supposed to protect disappeared under my command. After that, I left. I don't take orders anymore. Saria didn't speak right away. You think you failed them? I did. You're building this cabin for them too, aren't you? He met her gaze finally, and his silence was enough of an answer. She stepped closer. Then maybe you've built enough for ghosts, Rowan. You can start building for the living now. The word stayed with him long after she moved back to her work. By late afternoon, the cabin smelled of drying paint and sap. Rowan stood back to watch as IRI and Saria added the final streaks of purple to the door. The child's laughter mixed with the rustle of the forest, and for a moment, everything felt like a scene he wanted to freeze in time. Warm light, soft voices, something close to peace. When evening came, they sat outside for dinner. Saria had made a stew from dried root vegetables and the last of the Draxon mushrooms. IRI fell asleep halfway through her bowl, head against Saria's arm. Rowan poured her a small cup of coffee and said, You could have left days ago. You didn't. Saria looked up from her seat near the fire. I said I would, not that I wanted to. Then why stay? He asked quietly. She stirred the fire with a stick. The flames reflected in her eyes. Because I stopped running when you stopped asking me where I was going. You just gave us a place to stand. That's rare. Rowan didn't speak. He only nodded, his gaze steady on her. She shifted, suddenly aware of the weight of his attention. Don't look at me like that, she said softly. How am I looking? Like you're trying to remember me. He held her gaze, voice low. Maybe I am. The air between them changed. Less like conversation, more like understanding. Neither moved closer, but the distance between them suddenly felt fragile, like something waiting to break if either of them breathed too deeply. A branch cracked somewhere in the woods, pulling them both back. Rowan stood, scanning the tree lean automatically, eyes narrowing. Old habits. Relax, Saria said, though her voice trembled slightly. Probably an animal. Probably, he said, but he stayed standing until the sound faded. Only when the forest settled again did he sit back down, the tension slowly easing from his body. Saria watched him, her face unreadable. You still don't believe you're safe here, do you? I believe safety is something you earn every day, he said. You stop earning it, you lose it. She nodded, then said quietly, then I'll help you earn it. They stayed outside long after the fire dimmed, speaking less and listening more. The rain on the roof, the soft calls of nocturnal birds, IRI's small breath from inside. It was the kind of silence that wasn't empty. It was the sound of two people who'd learned to live through noise, finally learning how to exist in calm. Before they went inside, Surya stopped him near the door. "You didn't tell me what you'll do now that we're registered. What happens next?" He thought for a moment. "We keep building," he said. "A wall, a life, whatever stays standing." Surya looked at him for a long second, her eyes reflecting the faint light from the fire behind them. "Then promise me one thing, Rowan. If they come asking about us again, you won't lie." "Not for me." He hesitated, his jaw tight. "If I tell the truth, we lose this. Then maybe we'll build another," she said quietly. "But lies don't hold up in the rain." He didn't argue. He only nodded once, a quiet promise neither of them fully understood yet. When they went inside, IRI had curled herself against the painted door, one purple-stained hand still pressed on the wood. Surya lifted her gently, and Rowan watched as she carried the child to bed. For a moment, the light caught her face, the lines of exhaustion, the strength behind her calm, and something inside him settled. That night, he didn't dream of the war. He dreamed of rain on the roof, a purple door, and the sound of her voice saying his name without fear. The storm came at dawn, sharp wind, cold rain, and thunder rolling across the ridge like a low growl. Rowan was already awake, standing by the east wall, tightening the window seals with a strip of resin cloth. The wind howled through the trees, and he felt the whole structure shudder once before settling. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and wet pine. IRI stirred in her sleep, then bolted upright as thunder cracked again. "It's loud," she whispered. "It's just sound," Rowan said. "It can't touch you." Surya was already up, tying the shawl around her shoulders. "She's afraid," she said softly. "She's smart," he answered, glancing toward the roof. "Storms test what's been built." Outside, the rain hit hard enough to blur the tree line into a gray wall. He pushed open the door, stepped into the downpour, and tested the gutter he'd built the week before. The water flowed steady, no leaks. The roof held. For a moment, he stood there in the storm, soaked, eyes closed, breathing deep. It was the same kind of storm he'd once worked through on deployment, different world, same sound. Only this time, he wasn't running orders. He was making sure a child slept through it. When he came back inside, dripping, Surya stared at him. "You could have waited until it passed." He shrugged, shaking water from his hair. "Can't ask the weather for permission." "You never stop fixing things," she said, "even when they aren't broken." He gave her a small look, half smile, half truth. "You say that like it's a flaw." Surya didn't argue. She turned away to stir the pot on the stove. Steam rose with the sharp scent of ryle bark and sap. "You're freezing," she said. "Take that off before you catch something." He peeled off his soaked shirt and hung it near the fire. Surya didn't look away, but her movement slowed. Her gaze flicked over the scars on his shoulder, thin white lines from years of field service, each one healed but visible. She hadn't seen him like this before, and something in her expression softened. "How many?" she asked quietly. He glanced down at himself. Too many to count, most from training, some from trying to save people who didn't want saving. Surya stirred the pot again, her voice low. "And still you help strangers. Maybe because I never learned how to stop." The storm grew worse outside, wind slamming branches against the wall. IRI flinched and hid under a blanket. Surya crossed to her, whispering in her native tongue, a soft, melodic rhythm that made the girl's breathing slow again. Rowan watched, silent. The words didn't need translation. They sounded like safety. When the thunder faded a little, Surya came back to the stove. She poured 3 cups of thick, hot brew from the pot and handed one to him. "You should have told me before," she said quietly, "about what the war did to you." He took the cup, the heat steady in his hands. "Would it have changed anything?" "Yes," she said simply. "I would have understood the way you look at the world." Rowan frowned slightly. "And how do I look at it? Like it's something you're still trying to rebuild from the inside out." He didn't answer. She wasn't wrong. By mid-morning, the storm began to break. The air lightened, the clouds pulling apart in slow ribbons. IRI ran to the window, pressing her small hand against the glass. "The sky's blue again," she said. Rowan stepped beside her. "That's how you know you built right. The sun still finds you afterward. Later that day, they went outside to check the damage. The ground was soaked, puddles catching fragments of sky. The cabin had held perfectly. No leaks, no warp beams. Saria ran her hand along the wall, nodding in quiet satisfaction. "You were right," she said. "It passed." Rowan wiped rain off his jaw. Storms always do. They spent the afternoon clearing branches, fixing the small things that had come loose. IRI splashed through puddles, laughing. When she tripped and scraped her knee, Rowan crouched down immediately, rinsed it with clean water, and wrapped it with cloth. She didn't cry, just looked up at him. "You fix everything," she said. He smiled faintly. "That's the idea." By evening, the sky turned pale silver. The forest glowed with the after-rain shimmer that made every leaf look alive again. Saria cooked flatbread and berry stew inside, while Rowan checked the bond papers one last time. The official registry had gone through without issue. He read the confirmation stamp, legal residency verified, and felt something shift in his chest. They belonged here now, at least on paper. At dinner, IRI asked if they could paint more of the walls purple. Rowan laughed. "Let's not push our luck. One door's enough rebellion for now." Saria smiled faintly at that. Her hair was loose again, falling over her shoulders as she leaned close to the firelight. "You don't like change," she said. "I don't like uncertainty," he corrected. She studied him for a moment. Same thing. After dinner, when IRI was asleep, Saria sat near the window, staring at the dark sky. Her voice was quiet but steady. "You said once that you build because you can't undo what was destroyed. I think I understand now." Rowan looked at her. "Do you? You're not trying to rebuild the world," she said. "You're rebuilding yourself, piece by piece." He didn't deny it. He walked to her side and leaned against the wall. "And you? What are you rebuilding?" She turned her head toward him, eyes steady. "Trust. That someone won't walk away when the work is done." They didn't move for a long time. The fire flickered low, the cabin filled with the sound of slow, even rain outside. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you ever get tired of being the one who rescues?" He looked at her, his voice just as quiet. "Only when I start wanting to stay." Something passed between them then, wordless but undeniable. The same fragile stillness that had been growing since the day they met, now pressed close enough to feel. Saria didn't look away this time. When he finally reached out, it wasn't dramatic. Just a hand resting lightly on her shoulder, a simple gesture that said everything neither of them could. She didn't pull back. Her eyes closed for a heartbeat, her breath steadying. Outside, thunder rumbled one last time before fading completely. Inside, the warmth held steady. That night, Rowan lay awake, listening to the quiet. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the need to reach for his knife before sleep. The world outside could do whatever it wanted. Inside these walls, built by hand and held by trust, everything was still standing. The storm never returned. For 3 straight days, the sky above Kireth Vale stayed clean and blue, with sunlight flashing through the tall thalwood branches like shards of glass. The cabin dried in the wind, its new resin joints glinting faintly under the sun. Rowan stood outside that morning, shirt sleeves rolled, watching the steam rise from the damp soil. It wasn't just a shelter anymore. It looked lived in, footprints in the mud, smoke marks above the chimney, a child's purple handprint bright on the front door. Saria came out with a bundle of woven reeds under her arm. Her hair was unbraided, the wind moving through the copper strands. "We can use these to make shade mats for summer," she said. "You're already planning for summer," Rowan replied. "I'm not leaving, am I?" she said, a faint smile playing at the corner of her lips. He didn't answer immediately. He only nodded once, quietly satisfied that she'd said it first. Inside, IRI was painting again, her small hands pressing bright marks along the wall near her bedroll. When Rowan peeked in, she looked up and grinned. "You said I could finish the color," she said. "You did half the wall," he teased. "You'll run out of paint before the week's over." "Then we'll make more," she said confidently. "You can help me pick berries." He laughed softly, the kind of sound that had almost forgotten how to exist in him. "Deal." Later that day, he went to the ridge edge with his mapping pad, checking the route lines that ran under their plot. It was supposed to be routine survey work, but his mind wasn't on the numbers. Every few minutes, he found himself glancing back toward the cabin. The smoke, the purple door, the faint sound of voices inside. The idea of home had always felt like something distant and temporary. Now, it was a structure he could see from where he stood. When he returned, Surya was hanging the new mats near the window. She turned when she heard his boots. "I finished them. They'll block the sun in the afternoons." He stepped close, testing the weave with his fingertips. "Strong work," he said. Her eyes met his. "You sound surprised." "I'm not," he said, and his tone made her pause. The moment stretched between them, close, quiet, filled with something neither of them dared to name. "Rowan," she said finally, voice low, "you never told me what you'll do when the council's next inspection comes." He exhaled slowly. "I'll invite them in." "That's not a plan." "It's enough of one," he said. "The bond's legal now. They'll see what we've built and call it acceptable. And if they don't, then they'll have to say why." Surya stared at him for a moment, realizing what he meant. He wasn't bluffing. He would stand for this place, for them, in plain sight. "You're serious." "I've lived long enough hiding behind systems," Rowan said. "This time, the paper says what I already decided. We belong here." By mid-afternoon, IRI came running from the woods with a handful of berries and sap-stained fingers. "Look, for more paint," she said, holding them up proudly. Surya laughed and wiped her daughter's cheek. "You'll stain everything you touch." "That's how you know I was here," IRI said. That evening, they ate outside for the first time, flatbread crisped on the pan, Draxon mushrooms, and a small pot of sweet root stew Surya had made from foraged greens. The scent drifted through the clearing, mixing with pine resin and smoke. IRI sat between them, humming softly as she dipped her bread in the stew. When the light started to fade, Rowan lit the small lantern hanging by the porch. The orange glow framed them in warmth. Surya leaned back, watching the horizon fade from blue to amber. "It's quiet tonight," she said. "Quiet's not the same as empty," Rowan replied. She looked at him, studying the stillness in his face. "You're not alone anymore," she said softly. He met her gaze. "Neither are you." IRI yawned and leaned into her mother's side, half asleep. Surya brushed the girl's hair from her forehead and whispered something in her native language, a short phrase that sounded like a blessing. Rowan didn't ask for a translation. He just listened. When the girl finally drifted off, Surya stood and carried her inside. Rowan followed, closing the door behind them. The purple paint glowed faintly under the lantern light. On the table lay the signed bond papers, creased, smudged, but whole. He looked at them once more, then slid them under a carved bowl for safekeeping. Surya came back, wrapping her shawl tighter. She stopped beside him. "So, it's official," she said. "We have a home." Rowan nodded. "It's yours as much as mine." She gave him a look that was half disbelief, half gratitude. "You mean that?" "I wouldn't say it if I didn't." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, slow, and full of meaning. She took a small step closer. "You spend your life following rules, haven't you?" "Until they stop making sense," he said. "And now I just build what I want to protect." Her hand brushed his arm then, barely a touch, but enough to still the air. He didn't move. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "You don't have to protect me anymore," she said softly. "Maybe not," he replied, "but I want to." For a moment, everything between them was clear. The long months of solitude behind him, the long road of exile behind her, and the fragile, ordinary life they'd built together. She reached up, hesitating just once, then touched his face. "Then stay," she whispered. He didn't answer with words. He simply leaned in, and the space between them disappeared. The kiss wasn't hurried. It was quiet, steady, and real. The kind that belonged to people who'd already survived everything worth fearing. When they finally parted, she rested her forehead against his. "I thought I'd forgotten what safety felt like," she said. "Now you know," Rowan whispered. Outside, the wind had died completely. The trees stood still, reflecting starlight on their wet leaves. Inside, the cabin glowed with faint purple and gold, the color of peace earned by work, not given by mercy. IRI murmured in her sleep, and both of them turned, smiling quietly. Rowan walked to the table, picked up a small carving knife, and began etching something above the door. When he stepped back, Saria saw the words, two alphabets side by side, human and alien, carved clean into the beam. Home. She traced the letters with her fingers, eyes bright. "It's perfect," she said. He looked at her and at the small room filled with the sound of soft breathing and fire crackle. "No," he said, voice low and certain. "It's just right." The camera would have pulled back there, out through the door, past the clearing, through the trees, showing the small cabin standing solid beneath the endless Kareth sky. The east wall caught the morning's first light, resin shining, the purple door vivid against the timber. A man, an alien woman, and a child that built it together, not because they were trying to survive, but because they'd finally decided to live. And for the first time in years, Rowan Dunn didn't look like a man alone. He looked like someone who had finally stopped searching.